Hey PPLD makers, my name's Jennifer and today we're going to be talking about bee-friendly gardens and bee baths. So it's important to support bees in our ecosystems because a lot of the foods and plants we depend on for our survival, including favorites like apples and pumpkins, almonds, berries, and even things like hardwood trees, need pollinators to survive. Bees do this by traveling from plant to plant for nectar. They collect pollen in the process and spread it to other plants. Unfortunately, bees are threatened in a variety of ways, such as disease, loss of habitats, pesticides, and climate change. This is a big problem that a lot of researchers, farmers, scientists, and even governments are working on, and you can make a difference yourself by developing a bee-friendly backyard or urban garden. The first thing you'll want to think about is what kind of plants attract pollinators. At garden stores and home improvement shops, you can find a lot of Colorado-specific wildflower mixes that include native plants such as blue flax, bachelor buttons, black-eyed Susan, coneflower, things like that. The CSU Extension has a great guide on their website about native pollinator-friendly plants, which I'll link to in the description. You can plant your seeds using the instructions that come on the package. If you don't have a backyard, consider planting in window boxes or pots or planters. Another important thing to consider when planning out your bee garden is creating a generally bee-friendly environment. We live in Colorado where it's hot and dry, and just like it's important for people to stay hydrated, it's also important for bees to stay hydrated. So one way that you can help bees do their important pollination work is with a bee bath. A bee bath is just a shallow dish with rocks in it, and you put water in it so that the tops of the rocks are still exposed. That way a bee can fly in without getting its little feet wet, take their drink of water, and continue on with their day. So with this in mind, we'll talk about a few options for how to construct your bee bath. Today I'm working with polymer clay. As you can see, I've laid out some wax paper so that I don't mess up the surface of my table. I've also grabbed a few tools, including some plastic cutlery I got with takeout and something round to roll clay out with. As you can see, there's nothing too high-tech. Polymer clay can seem kind of hard at first, but the trick is to break off small pieces and kind of work them in your hands until they're soft and pliable. Polymer clay is not water-based, so it doesn't really dry out, but it will harden over time and should be stored in a plastic zip-top bag when not in use. The nice thing about working with clay is that you can really construct the bath in whichever way catches your fancy, but I wanted to show 3 possibilities to get your creative juices flowing. The first is a pinch pot, where you'll start by rolling a round, even ball. Using your thumb, you'll make an indentation that goes about halfway through, and then begin using a pinching motion with both hands to expand the indentation and shape your clay into a shallow dish. Next, you can try making a coil pot. To start, you'll roll your clay into a long snake. You want it to be thin enough that you get a good sized pot, but not too thin that it'll fall apart. Then you'll slowly begin curling one end of your snake in on itself and build your shallow dish up from that base. You can either leave the ridges from the coil as they are, as I've done here, or you can use your fingers or a tool to smooth them out. Finally, you might consider making a shaped pot. To do this, you'll roll your clay out onto your surface, like cookie dough, until it's about a 1/4 inch thick. If you use a glass or a jar like I've done here, be sure not to use too much pressure so that it doesn't break in your hand. It really doesn't take much effort to roll the clay out. While you can use a knife or a cookie cutter or other tool to cut out a shape, I kind of liked using just the kind of oval shape that I got from the clay. You're going to lay the clay over an upturned muffin tin, covered in tin foil to create the shape of your dish. When you go to bake the polymer clay, you'll bake it on this tin. To finish your bee bath, you'll want to place it on a baking sheet covered in tin foil and bake it according to the polymer clay instructions that came on the package. Polymer clay is non-toxic and it doesn't need to be coated or anything before you set it out for the bees. But definitely think of other ways that you might customize your bee baths. You might cut out different shapes from your polymer clay or other decorations. Think about mixing colors if that's something that you have. You can even paint the outsides of your bee baths if you're interested in customizing it that way. Just be careful about what you put on the inside to make sure that the bees aren't getting anything that's bad for them. When you place your bath outside for the bees to enjoy, you'll fill the bottom with small rocks and maybe even some twigs. And then you'll fill it with water while making sure the tops of the rocks and the twigs are exposed. The bees will be able to land on these rocks and hydrate safely as they enjoy your Colorado wildflowers. If you'd like to learn more about bees, bee gardening, or working with polymer clay, I've linked some of our PPLD resources down in the description below. If you share your finished bee garden on social media, we'd love to see it. Please tag it with hashtag PPLD Take and Make so that we can. And thank you so much for watching this video and happy making.